There's a strange moment that happens to some Europeans after living in America. They come home relieved to be back in a place that feels familiar, back to better trains, shorter distances, older streets, stronger safety nets, and the quiet competence of systems that don't need to advertise themselves. And then, a few days later, something unexpected starts happening. Not homesickness for America as an idea, homesickness for tiny American habits, tiny American sensations. The cashier who starts talking before you're ready, the stranger who treats a 2-minute interaction like a miniature performance, the giant supermarket at 10:30 at night, the sense that if you need something, the country will probably find a way to sell it to you immediately. What Europeans often miss after leaving America isn't always what America's most proud of. It's what America's built to do every single day. Make life feel big, fast, open, available, and strangely personal even when it isn't. And that matters, because the deeper question inside this title isn't really about 10 nostalgic details. It's about why a place can exhaust you and still leave fingerprints on your nervous system. The truth is, when Europeans miss America, they're usually not missing one country. They're missing a whole package of psychological signals: abundance, ease, mobility, friendliness, possibility. So here are 10 things many of them can't stop missing once they leave. The first is the simplest. They miss how easy it is to interact, not to become close friends. America is often misunderstood on that point. European visitors sometimes notice that Americans can be warm in the first 30 seconds and still keep real emotional distance. But that first 30 seconds matters more than people think. Internation's Expat reporting has consistently found that foreign residents in the U.S. rate Americans as unusually friendly. In its early U.S. country report, only 3% of expats rated general friendliness negatively, and the country ranked near the top for settling in. That doesn't mean every American is warm. It means public life in America often rewards visible openness, saying hi, smiling first, making the interaction easier. For a European returning home, what they miss is not fake intimacy. It's social lubrication, the sense that daily life has fewer tiny walls. And that leads to the second thing. They miss customer service that behaves as if time matters. In much of Europe, service is often professional, efficient, and restrained. In America, it's often theatrical, sometimes exhausting, sometimes obviously tip-driven, sometimes a little too enthusiastic. But when you've lived inside it for long enough, you notice what that performance is really doing. It is constantly telling the customer, your inconvenience is a problem that should be solved now. That mindset shows up everywhere in restaurants, retail, returns, complaints, hotel desks, call centers. It's not universal, and plenty of Americans will tell you service has declined. But the cultural expectation is still stronger. America tends to treat friction as a design failure. That comes with trade-offs, of course. Better service is often built on lower status service labor, emotional labor, and tipping pressure. But after leaving, many Europeans still miss the feeling of being helped quickly rather than merely processed. The third thing they miss is convenience so aggressive it starts to feel invisible. This might be the most American thing of all. Internation's Digital Life reporting found expats in the U.S. were especially happy with the ease of cashless payments. 95% rated it favorably. U.S. consumer spending also tells a bigger story. Americans spent an average of $3,933 on food away from home in 2023, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. That's not just about eating out. It reflects a culture built around outsourcing time. America is expensive in many ways, but it is also unbelievably committed to reducing small inconveniences. Drive-thrus, refills, returns, one-click ordering, massive store inventories, high-speed home internet, big operating hours. A country that often assumes the solution to inconvenience is scale. Back in Europe, life can feel more humane. It can also feel less immediate. And once you've been trained by American convenience, less immediate can feel like withdrawal. Then there's the fourth thing: space. Not just big houses. Space is a daily sensation. According to Eurostat, 16.9% of people in the EU lived in overcrowded households in 2024. The OECD Better Life data for the US reports 2.4 rooms per person, above the OECD average of 1.7. Now, Europe is not one thing here. Dutch housing is not Romanian housing. A Stockholm apartment is not a village house in Portugal. America is not one thing either. But many Europeans who lived in the US miss the physical generosity of it. The wider roads, the bigger fridges, the larger closets, the parking that feels absurd until you stop having to search for it. The sense that ordinary middle-class life can occupy more square footage. Of course, that space is not free. It often comes bundled with longer drives, weaker public transport, and a more car-dependent life. But the body still notices room when it loses it. The fifth thing they miss is America's scale as leisure. Inner Nations found expats in the US rated leisure options unusually highly, with more than half calling them excellent. And the National Park Service recorded more than 331 million recreation visits in 2024. That number matters because it points to something emotional, not just geographic. America does not merely offer nature, it stages nature. The canyon is bigger, the road is longer, the motel is lonelier, the sky is wider. Even ordinary travel in America can feel cinematic, and Europeans often notice that before Americans do. What they miss later is not just the Grand Canyon or Yellowstone. It's the feeling that weekends in America can expand, that leisure can involve distance, scale, and spectacle. Then comes one of the less romantic answers: money. A lot of Europeans leave America criticizing the cost of living, and often for good reason. Healthcare, rent, childcare, and higher education can be brutal, but many still miss the upside. The OECD Better Life data puts US at household net adjusted disposable income per capita at $51,147 a year, far above the OECD average of $30,490. Even when the American system feels harsher, it often feels more lucrative. That doesn't mean people are better off in every sense. Plenty aren't. A big paycheck inside a high-risk system is not the same thing as security. But for Europeans who spent time in the US, especially in high-paying sectors, America can create a difficult memory. A place where work felt more financially explosive. And that feeds directly into the seventh thing they miss: career momentum. In the same Inner Nations reporting, expats in the US rated career prospects very highly. 23% said they were completely satisfied with their career opportunities, compared with 15% globally. That gap captures something real. America often feels more willing to let people move jobs, move cities, move industries, move up before they feel fully ready. European labor markets can feel more stable, more protected, and more humane. They can also feel more legible, which is another way of saying more bounded. What some Europeans miss after leaving America is that sense of acceleration, that the labor market may not love you, but it will at least entertain the possibility that you can become someone else quickly. Which leads to the eighth thing. They miss America's permission to reinvent yourself. Pew's transatlantic polling found Americans were more likely than Europeans to believe they control their own destiny. 57% of Americans disagreed with the idea that success is determined by forces outside their control. And 73% said hard work is very important for getting ahead, compared with a European median of 35%. Now, belief is not reality. America often oversells mobility. It tells a bigger meritocratic story than the data can fully justify. But belief changes behavior. When a culture keeps repeating that you can start again, people begin to organize their lives around second drafts. Some Europeans come home missing that emotional permission. Not because Europe lacks ambition, but because America packages ambition more openly. Less apology, less embarrassment, more visible striving. The ninth thing is related, but softer. They miss the confidence. Not necessarily confidence as competence. Confidence as atmosphere. America often teaches people to speak before they are fully certain, to pitch before they are fully ready, to introduce themselves as if self-description were an ordinary skill. Pew found Americans are more likely than Europeans to prioritize individual liberty over the state's duty to ensure no one is in need. Gallup's latest freedom polling also shows that even after a decline, 72% of Americans still say they are satisfied with their freedom to choose what to do with their lives. That doesn't mean America feels freer to everyone, or equally free to everyone. Gallup's data shows serious cracks, especially by gender. But in everyday behavior, the culture still projects a strong signal. Act like you have room. And when Europeans leave, some of them miss that emotional volume. Not all of it, not the bragging, not the excess, but the permission to be less guarded in public. And the 10th thing they miss may be the most paradoxical. They miss how many different Americas live inside America. From the outside, Europe often sees America as one giant cultural object. But inside it, America can feel like a constantly remixing system. The U.S. is the largest immigrant receiving economy in the OECD world, with roughly 45.3 million immigrants, according to the Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis's summary of OECD patterns. That matters not just demographically, but emotionally. Because one thing many Europeans miss after living in America is variety at full volume. Not just food variety, identity variety, regional personality variety. The feeling that one country contains dozens of different social scripts and keeps inventing new ones. That can also make America fragmented, uneven, and exhausting. it can feel rootless. Europe, by contrast, often offers thicker local continuity, older habits, older institutions, older identities. But that's exactly the point. What Europeans often miss after leaving America is not that America is better. It's that America is louder in the areas where modern life most directly touches the individual: choice, service, space, speed, reinvention, scale. And maybe that's the real surprise. People assume homesickness is always about where life was more comfortable. Sometimes it's about where life felt more amplified. Because Europe can be wiser in many ways: calmer, older, more socially protective, more measured. America can be harsher, more unequal, more performative, more tiring. But America is also unusually good at making daily life feel available. Available friendship, available food, available motion, available possibility. That doesn't mean Europeans who miss those things want to move back. It means that after living in America, they often return home carrying a new standard for what a society can make people feel in ordinary moments. And maybe that's why this comparison never really ends. Not because one side wins, but because each side exposes what the other has trained itself not to notice. If you've lived on either side of the Atlantic, I'd be curious which part stays with you longest, not the postcard version, but the tiny everyday thing you only noticed once it was gone.